when you ask a lawyer to do any work for you, we call it briefing a lawyer. You are, that lawyer is being briefed in their personal capacity because barristers work as individuals. They don't work as a group. So if you're assigning me legal work that is akin to litigation, akin to trial, you actually take me personally, the barrister personally. So it doesn't matter whether the barrister is operating in a firm. Now that's the professional aspect. When it comes to the money, I work for a firm and the firm pays me a salary. Of course, as a partner at the end of the year, if we make profit, I get a percentage of the profit. Yeah, but as a partner working for the firm, I have a salary and that firm pays it. So everything I earn has to be brought to the firm. So the firm is the firm that bills. And when the firm bills, it doesn't mean when the bill is paid, the money is given to me. No, the firm has overheads. The farm has office rent costs, it has staff costs, it has light costs like any other company. So all those costs have to be deducted from the money that comes in. And it's the balance now that will form part of surplus, the surplus money and the profit of the farm. Now that we have a way of determining the how partners are paid. So that is why the firm bills, because I work for a firm. Even though I was contracted individually, my contract with the firm is that all money has to come to the firm because I'm using the firm's resources. I'm using the firm's resources. And so everything has to, that's why the firm bills. And that this is understood. It's not a problem. It is understood. And that's why the Ministry of Justice accepted the fee notes with the letterhead of my firm, because this is what obtains, this is the procedure. So there is really, unless you want me to explain further. So
Yes,
basically,
I would like you to explain further because
succinctly, I was engaged in my personal capacity, but I work for a firm. And if I earn any money, if I sign any contract, I have to have the approval of the firm. Without the approval, I cannot go ahead and take any work. So when I was contracted, I said, so it's in my letter, I consulted with my partner. The firm said I could go ahead and accept this job. I accepted it, but the money has to come to the firm. So the firm built, and of course, the Ministry of Justice accepted it because that is quite normal.
thank you for that clarity. I mean, Miss Bensouda. I would just like more clarity because why am I asking this is because the other time you were asked, you did buttress on the fact that indeed the contract was given to you or the appointment was made in your individual capacity. And I could recall a member asked you about if there are implications, whether the firm would be part of it. And you pointed to paragraph 4 of your engagement letter, which is very correct. So now in my mind, what I'm asking clarity for, of course, it is known that you and the firm, you are two separate entities. So my question was going to be, how do you reconcile the norm of legal practice against that separate entity clause? And again, at the end of the day, how do you reconcile that paragraph 4 of,
Honorable,
yes, I guess
Honorable,
you understand the question.
yes, I think I do.
Yes.
Paragraph 4 is clear that I'm responsible. The firm is a legal entity. I'm responsible. It's quite clear that I will be responsible for anything that goes wrong. The 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 fee note is just about the money. It has nothing to do with my responsibility as lead counsel. So I think we should try to separate the two. You know, I could have asked anyone, an agent, and say, well, can you submit an attorney? Could tell the ministry, look, I'll pay me through this person. You pay me, but I'm working for you. I mean, it's nothing extraordinary about it. You could be working for someone and say, well, can you pay my money to Anila? As long as you authorize, they will pay it. So there's nothing extraordinary about it.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bensouda. We'll leave that. In your engagements with Council Diba, you did make a reflection of the working relationship that existed in the Janneh Commission. And then you also did indicate that there was a functional relationship.
There was
A functional relationship,
Mm-hmm.
you know, instead of a hierarchical one.
Mm-hmm.
But we had previous witnesses here, Ms. Ramatullah Sar and Ms. Abiose George. And it might interest you to note that what they presented before the committee was a hierarchical organogram where you have the commissioners and there is one among them who is more powerful and the equals, and then you will have the secretariat. Under the secretariat, you will have the lead counsel. Under the lead counsel, then you will have the investigation team, the legal team, and under the secretariat again, directly under the secretariat, you'll have the security and others. That seems to be at opposite with what you are saying. So my question would be, does issues of hierarchical relationship with regards to your work pose as challenges during your time at the Janneh Commission?
Never. Everybody was clear as to what their responsibility was, as far as I'm concerned. And that is why the commission report, I'm surprised that any commissioner would come and describe a relationship that's different from what is in their report. This is their own report, and they have explained how things work. So I'd urge the members of the committee, I'd urge you to read the report. What is in the report is what obtained. This is the report of the commissioners. So I'm surprised. As regards the secretary and any other person, perhaps they didn't quite understand. The second secretary came after we had almost completed most of the work. And you did show me a letter where I wrote, she said to her, explaining how things work. So perhaps she didn't quite understand. But no commissioner can come after they've submitted the report and say something different from what is in the report. So there was no hierarchical relationship. It's completely functional. The commission was the commission. Their role was the most important, and it's entirely in the law. They hear the evidence in public hearing, and they review the evidence. They write their reports. I am the lawyer. Let's start with the investigators. There are a team of investigators. This is in the commission, the TOR issued by the president, that the IGP will provide investigators. And there were a team of investigators, and the investigators investigated, presented their investigation to me as counsel. I reviewed it, and if it met the required standard, I submitted it to the commissioners. So there were three functions: investigation, legal counsel, commission. So these are the three. Now, as regards the secretariat, which supports the commission, one can say there is a hierarchical relationship perhaps, because you have the secretary, assistant secretary, you had clerks, you had units, perhaps there is a structure there. But that's not my unit, and I really did not pay particular attention to that, what was going on in terms of relationship between secretary and the others. It wasn't my business. That I worked with the secretary. I never work with assistant secretary when there is a secretary. Now, as far as commission is concerned, they were separate from me. I presented evidence to them. Just pretty much when I submit, they can say, well, reject, accept, admitted. Can you explain? Can you address us? Can you give us a brief as happened? But I'm independent. They can direct me as to how I do it. So I don't report to the commission. There is no hierarchical relationship between me and the commissioners. As regards the investigators, they're independent. They go and do their investigations. Then I tell them if it's adequate, I accept it, which I submit. If it's not, I tell them this is not. We had meetings. At the meetings, I would provide guidance that this is not court, this is a commission, and this is what we need from you. That is my legal input into the work they were doing. But I was not their boss. I could not tell them what to do and what not to do in terms of outside of anything that related to a matter they were investigating. But in relation to a matter they investigate, I can say, well, look, this your report is not good enough. I can't submit this to the commissioners. There is no evidence. There are no facts. You know, send it back. You have to do this. If you don't understand, come back. Then I'll tell them this is the law, and this is what if you're saying if you reach a in every investigation the investigator would reach conclusion. In every investigation file, they reach a conclusion. But that conclusion, if it's not supported by the evidence in the file, I'll send it back and say, well, this is your conclusion, it's not supported. Perhaps you should look at this area. Perhaps you can look at, well, I'll call you and we have a meeting. This is the law, and this is what you should be looking for. So that's not hierarchical. So I'm trying to explain again, but really everything has been explained in the commission report. And I think that is the official legal report. What witnesses can say anything depending on their understanding or their perception, and their understanding may be wrong. But this report, presented to the president and accepted, the report is the report that should be considered, taken into account by this committee, nothing else.
Very well, Ms. Bensouda. Perhaps can you make references to the report as a guide to the committee?
Yes,
which,
certainly.
mhm.
Volume 1 of the report, it's volume 1 and 2 are together. And volume 1 is the general introduction. And it's from page 5 to page 40.
Okay.
So it's quite comprehensive. And you'll find at page 10, from page 10, method of work. Page 10 is entitled Method of Work. And it sets out from page 10 to 11 how the commission operated. 10 to 11, so more than that, actually. Page.
No, very well.
Yes,
That's,
so you
that's,
see
that's
A to
okay.
F, paragraph A to paragraph F.
Okay.
How the commission operated. So anything else is just really.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think that's well understood.
Yeah.
And that takes me to the other one, because the people who came were part of the commission. So the committee just wants to have understanding from different perspectives. That's why my last question on that would be, can you recall any meeting where you might be present and then challenges were highlighted, and one of it would be with regards to relationships, workflows, and in particular, trying to depict a hierarchical relationship within the setup of any commission?
IT, please help the witness.
It was an 18-month period. We didn't think it would last up 18 months, but it's amazing how much we accomplished within 18 months. And there were many meetings. Now, meetings in which tempers flared, there might have been, but really, I can't remember the details. I mean, for me, I have headed institutions for the past 40 years. My brain doesn't keep, when issues arise, addressed, and we move on. So I don't really keep those things in my head. Little problems, they're expected. We're human.
That's very well.
We're human. They're expected. But they were not, if they were so critical, I would remember. But nothing that was critical, to be honest. Nothing.
Thank you for that submission. In your earlier submission to the previous question, you did make indications, or what I would like to say preempted my follow-up question, when you said when investigators do their investigation and they are ready, they will write conclusions. And then from those conclusions, you will determine the merit of what they are bringing in so that you can advise the commissioners. That takes me back to your submission to the lead counsel yesterday, when you were trying to explain Section 204 of the Constitution and indicate that findings of the Commission, most or adverse ones, could be somehow equal to rulings of what? The
A judgment. The
a judgment
Constitution says judgment of the High Court.
of the High Court. And as such, you have the responsibility to make a balance of what? Probability. And I kind of believe in this case that balance of probability, you normally draw it from the conclusions that are made by the investigation team. So here, what I'll be indulging on is perhaps if you can enlighten this community further.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to do that. The Constitution, as I said in Section 204, provides that it's an addition to the Commission making findings and recommendations. They have to put on notice anyone against whom an adverse finding has been made. Adverse meaning a finding that will affect that person legally, one way or the other. Maybe it's a conclusion that this person is responsible for, let's say, $100,000 that could not be found. Meaning, you are actually saying this person, there should be a legal process perhaps to record this money from this person. Or we have reached a conclusion that what this person did amounted to misappropriation of funds. Or any adverse finding that this person knew, for instance, that the president was doing this and it was wrong and he was complicit. So these are all adverse findings. So if we make that sort of finding, we have to send a notice at the moment we are submitting our report to the president. At the same time, we have to send a notice to that person that, look, the commission has made an adverse finding. So this is what the section provides. And that person has 90 days to appeal to the Gambia Court of Appeal against the adverse finding. And in that appeal, the report of the commission on that matter will be regarded as a judgment of the court. Now, when it comes to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal looks at the report as a judgment and looks at the adverse findings. And what the Court of Appeal, we have certain standards of when it comes to accepting or in the courts. I'm trying to explain it in layman's language. The court applies certain standards in accepting whether you have proven a case or not proven a case. When it comes to civil cases, that is non-criminal cases, there is what is called a balance of probability. The court will say, well, I have looked at all the evidence, reviewed all the evidence, and on a balance of probabilities, I think the matter is proven. The conclusion is correct from the evidence. That is civil. But if it's criminal, like you said, somebody stole something, you have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt. So the court will say, well, I've looked at the evidence, but I'm not satisfied that this evidence is sufficient to prove this matter beyond reasonable doubt. So what was my role? My role when the investors investigate and they make a conclusion, which gives rise to a civil wrong, a civil claim, right? I would have to look at what they have brought, the evidence, the witnesses. Why are they saying that? Why are they reaching this conclusion? If thinking like we lawyers, we try to anticipate what the judge wants. And I would say, look, sorry, what you have here is not sufficient to prove what you are saying. Or what you are saying is the wrong conclusion. I have read it, but my conclusion, the conclusion I have reached from the evidence you have provided is different. So please go and look at it again. So there's this balance of probabilities for civil cases, proof on a balance of probabilities. In criminal cases, proof beyond reasonable doubt. So my job was legal. So I cannot just take any evidence, any statement, and throw it at the commissioners. You know, um, I can submit everything, but at the end of the day, I had to also write a brief and say, well, these are the evidence, this is what the evidence points to. I leave it to you commissioners to decide. So we wrote briefs, not on everything, because the accounts that didn't need brief, the commissioners, some of them were experts, so they looked at the accounts. But on other matters, we would look at it, we would write briefs and send it. So that was my role. So if you understand it in that way, you could see the relationship between counsel and the investigation. And that is how it worked. So I hope that helps.
It does, and I think it did at a very right time, at a time when Council Deba is coming in. And indeed, you've provided lectures today,
Oh,
and very good
thank
ones.
you.
Huh?
Actually, I'm a lecturer at the law school.
Yes, you did. Because when you in fact answered the second question I was going to ask, whether those conclusions from the investigation team are always provided to the commissioners in totality. You did indicate in your response that you will give them everything, but again, you will provide a brief to say what needs to be done. Am I right in that?
The investigation reports. Mm. I can't now remember whether the conclusion of the investigator will be given to the commissioners. I don't think the conclusions were given. I think we submitted all the statements, all the evidence that the investigators brought, and some of them were, the investigators had to write an affidavit, and we had to submit it, but the conclusions of the investigations were not submitted. It's just like a court. You don't submit the conclusion of the investigator. The premise of what you submit to the commission is what the investigations themselves, not the conclusion, because the investigators are not judges or lawyers. They're not qualified lawyers. But you put forward um, the evidence, and of course, there's always a theory. You know, we have legal theory behind what we do. The evidence leads to something. So our terms of reference guided us. Okay, and basically you're investigating an asset. Did the president own this asset? Did he purchase it? How did he come by this asset? Some of it is straightforward, but you'll be surprised that in relation, perhaps not surprised. As far as movable assets are concerned, they were not registered in the president's name. He controlled them like vehicles. They were not registered at all. But you could investigate, like the team that went to US were able to investigate and came with records to show that certain vehicles were purchased through the embassy, but using funds, state funds, that were then sent to the embassy. Vehicles were purchased, but these vehicles were then transferred to KGI. So that's the trail that you look at. So what is the theory? The theory is that, the president purchased these vehicles from public funds. So the investigators have to show why they say the president purchased this vehicle from public funds. So they follow the funds and come to a conclusion. And then we present that, because that's the crux of the investigation. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Bensouda. I just have one question on the FTI consulting. In your response to either Council Aji or the honorable member, you did indicate that the specialized skills they had was not present locally. But that differs from the response we had from one of the commissioners who was before us, who in fact indicated that at the end of the day, there were gaps in the analysis they made on the accounts of both NAWEC and GAM Petroleum. And that commissioner fervently believed that the work would have been done locally. So I'm just trying to reconcile the different views that are coming from the same commission.
Um, let me say that at the end, the quality of the work that FTI did was not as we expected. And that is why they were discontinued, because after all, they just did two, Gamtel, um, not Gamtel, they did Gam Petroleum and NAWEC. So we were not satisfied. I wasn't satisfied with the quality of their work. And I did have sessions with them and meetings with, I think the FTI people were, I think they were from the Caribbean. I can't even remember now, but I'll check. But I had meetings with them, and I wasn't quite satisfied that they were useful. Um, they were handicapped in a way because they also didn't have access to the information they wanted. And if I remember rightly, that was part of the problem. But I wasn't satisfied. So if in terms of quality, yes, our expectations were higher than what we saw. Now, whether now they were forensic experts, I didn't know of any. And certainly no commissioner brought to my attention any forensic investigator, forensic accountant in Gambia at the time. That was one. Secondly, I don't think there was any budget for paying forensic experts at all. The only reason Ford Foundation agreed to pay was because these people were international and they were charging international rates. So we said, okay, these people can be useful to us. They can be useful to us because we certainly need a forensic expert to go through to the reports. And that is why we said with Ford Foundation, there are this team of experts that have offered their services. Gambia government cannot afford to pay them. So we applied to Ford Foundation. I think it was Ford Foundation. Ford Foundation agreed to pay. The Ministry of Justice was, of course, part of the decision-making process. But as I said, they paid for what they did and we stopped it because um, we did not think the quality or warranted for them to continue. That's the way I would put it.
Yes.
But the Ford Foundation did not provide any resources that I know of to the commission. Certainly not to me. Nobody provided resources to my office. So when it comes to money, it has to be through the government. The commission did not have power to ask anyone to give them money directly. No.
Yes. Then I think then certainly we can agree that the view of the commission was clear with regards to the performance of FTI, that
Yes,
their performance fell short of expectations.
fair sort of expectations. I'll accept that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Then let's look at the sales of cattle.
Yes.
In your statement, there's a place that you indicate that your advice was for the sales of certain items, including the cattle, be handled by the safe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Initially, that was my advice.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And is it also correct to say that the other commissioners were not aware of that advice? Will it be correct to say that?
No, definitely not correct.
Hmm.
Definitely not correct. We
How?
had discussions about the cattle, and I wasn't keen on. I think the secretary wanted to do it, thought he had the expertise to do it. I wasn't keen on that. One, because I did not want any conflict with the courts. That was the early days, and these were court orders. So I think there were options. We discussed it, I think, at length. Finally, it was decided, the commission ordered, and I didn't have any problem with that, that the secretary could do it together with Gilma, as they are called. So I helped in drafting, my office, my team helped in drafting the application to the court for the commission, that is the secretary and Gilma. And of course, you have the order as it is worded, and for me to be for me to be consulted in the process. It was sent to the courts, and the court said no. The court said approved the order, but buried it and said, sorry, I'm trying to use legal language, but the court granted the order for the cattle to be sold, but said the sheriff should do it. That's fine, because I had at some point said that the sheriff should do it. But I think this was during discussion. Now, to say that nobody is aware, it's been 7 years, but I recollect that that was my view. However, nobody, I think, afterwards was happy about the sheriff and the cattle because we didn't get a report and there were rumors, but I don't peddle in rumors. So when it came to the vehicles, the issue of going to court, nobody was keen on going back to the courts because, the cattle thing was not clear to us at the commission how the sheriff handled it because we did not get a report. So, so the issue of sheriff was laid to rest. But I definitely do remember that I would have, at the early stage, preferred the matter to go to the sheriff rather than done by the secretary.
But on hindsight, would you have done it differently? Perhaps
No,
maybe let me add context to that because
it was not my decision in hindsight even. I mean, it's not my decision.
yeah,
The commission issued an order, and that didn't include the sheriff. And the order went to the court. The court decided the sheriff should do it. No, we couldn't have done anything else.
you couldn't have gone back to the courts.
In respect of,
I mean, seeing how best they can set aside that order or revisit the order itself to ensure that there are certain controls in it that would include
no,
the commission itself.
no, that's not how it works. The
Uh,
commission is parallel. It has
maybe,
nothing to do with the courts.
maybe let me add context to it
Yes.
because the submission before the committee is the sales of cattle happened. The commissioners or the Janneh Commission didn't receive a report. In fact, they didn't know how it happened. And if you look at the court order that was granted in effect to the sales of the cattle, it ordered the sheriff to do it. And then Gilmer also was a party in the court order. But there was no way that Janneh Commission had a role to play. So in hindsight, what I'm asking now is, would you have revisited that order? Or perhaps ensure that in the order that was going to be granted by the courts, the Janneh Commission would be included as a control parameter?
No, it was not our responsibility. We would be going far beyond our mandate. The Janneh Commission could never have done that. The Janneh Commission is an independent commission. It was the court that started the whole process, gave custody of movables to the Registrar General. Now, and of course, Gilmer for the cattle. There was a problem. How do we solve the problem? These cattle are being stolen. That's the report. How do we solve the problem? Should it be done by the court? Should it be done? It has to be either or. It cannot be both. The two cannot overlap. It cannot be both. It has to be either the courts took care of it or the commission took care of it. The commission, out of an abundance of caution, said, okay, let's make an order for the secretary to take care of it because it seems he says he can. And I had no problem with that. I would have preferred that we left it to the court entirely. But the commission ordered that the secretary could take care of it together with Gilmer, and I had a role as well that they would report to me. The matter went to the court. The court said no. The court was entirely within its jurisdiction because the case was before the court. It was the court that, dealt with the whole situation first. They said no. Yes, the cattle should be sold, definitely. But the court officers will take care of it. The sheriff, assisted by Gilmer, even the money should be paid to the court. That was the end of it as far as the commission was concerned. So we don't have any jurisdiction to go and say, oh, court, change this. No. That would be going beyond our mandate. was not our responsibility. So, but when it came to the second part, the vehicles, since it's either or, we decided to do the or. That is, leave the courts and just deal with the situation.
Okay, I'll come to
Okay.
the vehicles perhaps, because here what I'm trying to understand is, if you look at the initial order, uh, that is the order of the 22nd of May,
Yes,
it was to make sure that the assets were preserved and to really protect them from dissipation.
yes.
And eventually, we ended up having the Janneh Commission. And to a large extent, that was equally part of the Janneh Commission's responsibility, not only to unearth the truth as to how those assets were acquired, but part of the responsibility of the Janneh Commission was also to see how these assets will be preserved against dissipation. Is it by way of telling the state, take control of them? Is it by way of selling them and ensuring that you have money at the bank? But I believe that the sales of this cattle happened at a time when the Janneh Commission was still sitting. So now, if you look at the cattle sales, they were marked by a lot of irregularities, undervaluations, stealing them, and a hold. So now, what I am trying to reconcile here is allowing a process to go. I'm not saying we know the courts have the final verdict, okay? But what I'm saying here is trying to say the Janneh Commission does not have any opportunity to even appeal to the court
Mm.
to say, look, our mandate have to do with the preservation of these assets. And now you are selling them. We are not saying that we want to sell them, but in the sales process, we want to have some controls so that we can have an eye into exactly what is happening. Because at the end of the day, the sales were done, you didn't receive a report. In fact, very little of it was highlighted in your report. So in totality, we can't tell how much of it constitute the broader assets value of the former president. Will I react to that?
Yes. Let
Mhm.
me explain. I think perhaps there's a little bit of a confusion. The whole issue of these assets started as a case. It started as a case launched by filed by the Attorney General, by the government against the president, based on reports they had that the president had in sort of abused his power and accumulated a lot of assets. So they went to court. See, the court had jurisdiction over the issue. What we call the court had a mandate over the issue as it was presented by the government, the Attorney General. And they brought the case under a particular statute, which is the money laundering statute. So the court did not make a preservative order. That is that is not a preservation order. What the court did was it froze the assets. It froze the assets, meaning by freezing the asset, it means you are preventing the apparent owner, the person who's said to be the owner, you're preventing him from having access. That is what a freezing order does. But if you prevent the owner from having access, you have to put somebody in charge. So what the court did is what the Attorney General applied for. It put three entities in charge. It put the Registrar General in charge of movables and property. It put Gilmer in charge of cattle. It put the receiver in charge of companies. It remained frozen by the court, but custody was given to these entities. So these entities were supposed to go, take charge, do whatever they need to do to make sure that these cattle are secure. That's their role. When you do a freezing order and you give custody, that's their role. Because the issue of preservation did not arise. It is assumed that the properties are there all these entities had to do was go take over these assets and keep them secure until the case is judgment, until the case is finished. If the Attorney General proves his case, then orders will be made. If the Attorney General fails, the assets will be released, the freeze will be lifted, and the assets will be returned back to the owner. Now, I think the government got overwhelmed because this was a big thing, it was not a small thing. Companies, assets, properties everywhere. So the government then decided that, look, the faster route is to set up a commission of inquiry, and that commission will help us prove what, what former president owned and did not own. So the issue of preservation arose when the commission started, and I wrote to all these entities and I said, give us a report as to the status of your trusteeship. They were trustees kind of. And then Gilmer wrote to say, we did not even take over the cattle because they gave their reasons. The Registrar General wrote and said, yes, we took an inventory, but we know the cattle is being stolen. That is when the issue of preservation arose. Now, there were two choices open to the Attorney General: to go back to the court and say to the court, cattle is being stolen, we need a preservation order, but what we need is to sell them. Go directly to the court. The commission was aware. This has nothing to do with the Attorney General at first. The commission is aware that these cattle are being stolen, but these are the assets we are investigated. If they are all stolen by the time we finish, what would be the point in our investigation? We have an order. We have the power to make an order. So that's where the discussion arose. But we have power, the court has power. What should we do? So we said, okay, we have power. Let's make the order, but let's ask the Attorney General to consult the court. So we made the order. We said to Attorney General, because we as a commission, we cannot apply to the court. We cannot. It's not within our mandate to do that. We said to Attorney General, the best option would be for you, we made the order, but go and consult with the court. Apply to the court for its approval. Attorney General went, applied to the court. The court said, okay, fine, the cattle should be sold, but why the commission? This is under our jurisdiction. So we have a sheriff department who's appointed under a statute, who is set up to do this very thing, that is sell assets. That's why the sheriff is there, a big part of, in fact, the major part of the sheriff's function is to deal with assets after a case is finished. They should have the capacity to sell, capacity to advertise. They have a process to follow. So that's fine. So the sheriff was given charge. The commission was happy. Now, but how did the sheriff do it? That's a different story. Has nothing to do with the commission. But when the court takes over, the commission has no place. So it's not for the commission to say, no, let us be part of it. Why? It's not personal. The court has power to do it. They have a setup to do it. They have a sheriff office to do this. This is what they do. So that's why, just to explain, that's why the commission did not have legally the authority to interfere with whatever the court did, and they did not have the power to do so anyway. So we allowed that to take its due course. We expected, because the court has its own processes. People who were not happy with what the sheriff was doing and knew about it should have applied to the court. They should have brought it to the attention of the court, and the court would redress it. There is a process where you can challenge what the sheriff does. So if you're not happy, you report it. You don't wait 6 years later, and then you raise it.
Very well, Ms. Mansoura.
Yes.
I think that was indeed elaborative. Now, the final question on the issue of the cattle will be, with reference to paragraph 18 of your statement, where you indicated that the issues of irregularities with regards to the sales of cattle did not arise during the time that the commission was sitting, but indeed, if at all there were reports received during the time of the commission would have taken some steps, and you gave examples. One of it was maybe reporting it to the IGP for investigation. So now, in hindsight, do you think the court's order was practical enough?
Absolutely. It was within the courts are set up in a certain way. And a big part of what they don't just give judgment. Okay, I agree. The case between Mr. Fofana and Mr. Sisi, judgment for Mr. Sisi, you own the house. How is Mr. Sisi going to take the house from you? That's when the sheriff steps in and make sure that they kick you out of the house. Sorry for using that language in such an August house. They take you out of the house and give the house to Mr. Sisi. If you have an argument on a herd of cattle, I own the herd, you own the herd. At the end of the day, the herd is with Mr. Sar. The court makes the order. How are you going to take the herd from Mr. Sar if you succeed? The sheriff goes to Mr. Sar and takes the cattle. The court may say, okay, the fair order is for the cattle to be sold and the money, whatever, the claim. What is going to happen? The sheriff is set up to do that sort of thing. So I was very surprised to hear that the whole thing was, I don't know, from what the evidence I saw in the newspapers, but that is what the sheriff is set up to do, to enforce orders. It doesn't matter what the nature of the property. It doesn't matter whether it's property, whether it's car, whether it's anything. The sheriff is set up to do. And he can be held to account because he's set up as an institution to do just what the court ordered that he should do. So I don't see how the situation could have been mismanaged because it was within this is what he's supposed to do. That's what the sheriff's office is supposed to do. So if they did it well, kudos. If they didn't do it well and there are problems, they should answer for it. It's such a simple, straightforward thing for me.
Yes, and that's why I'm asking about the question of practicality. Because indeed, if you look at the sheriff's order, it was not only the court's order, it was not only the sheriff, but Gilmer also had a role to play.
Yes.
Okay, but at the end of the day, it didn't happen that way. And if I make reflections on about paragraph 18, I still keep questioning myself
Mm.
whether indeed the commission should have been part of it. Because you've clearly indicated that if the commission was aware of the irregularities, it would have done something.
You know,
So now the question is, who would have informed the commission, or who should have informed the commission? That is the question.
any person
Oh,
who's aggrieved, you know, the courts work in a special way.
yes,
Courts, when you have something else to
yes,
ask,
yes.
yes.
In this case, the court made an order, and the parties were expected to implement that particular order. Okay, and 6, 7 years down the line, we realize that, in fact, all of those parties have faulted in the execution of that order. Hmm? But there was one critical element, one critical setup we could have relied upon, and there was no way that they could be informed, because the cattle sales, the proceeds, and whatnot should have been an integral part of the Janneh Commission report. Indeed, you've made reflections on it, but it was very minimal because you didn't receive reports. You couldn't quantify it. The sales proceeds, there was no way that you could discuss about it. So just finally on it, I want us to draw closer on it. On hindsight, do you believe that some control mechanisms should have been in place to ensure that the Janneh Commission had hands on all the assets that were connected to the former president? In specific terms, the cattle in this case.
No, it was not possible. This whole thing started as a court. The court had a mandate. The only way you can challenge the mandate of a court is to appeal to a higher authority. When the court decides, it has decided. If you don't agree, you appeal to the Court of Appeal. Now, we are not part of the case. It's the Attorney General's case. We made an order and said to Attorney General, well, we've made this order, or the commission made the order and said to the Attorney General, this order has been made, but consult with the court, seek the court's approval. We couldn't, because that's not how commissions work. The Attorney General sought the court has a discussion. The court doesn't do what anybody says. The judge had a discussion, and that is the way he exercised his discretion. There was nothing the commission could do, absolutely nothing. If the Attorney General did not like the way the court handled it, they could have appealed, but that's all they could have done. But that would be another process. And meanwhile, the cattle are disappearing. But there was nothing on the face of it. Let me say, as I said, there's nothing on the face of it wrong with what the court ordered. How it was executed, uh, those who are accountable should be held accountable. But there is no, in hindsight, really, it's nothing could have been done that wasn't done. And let me also say that the order by the commission to preserve these assets was incidental. It was not the core mandate of the commission. The commission's core mandate was to investigate ownership of all these assets. But the order that, well, look, these assets are disappearing, that's an incidental power that the commission has to make interim orders. And they utilize that power to say, look, take care of this situation. But it was not within their core mandate.
So it's your submission that you were indeed, the commission was satisfied with the court order?
The commission had no objection to the court
To the
order. And
court
even
order.
if it did, there was nothing it could do about it.
Of course, you could have advised MOJ to make an appeal.
To appeal,
Yes.
it was not our place to do that.
You couldn't have
As
advised
far as the
MOJ.
commission is concerned, let somebody take care of these assets before they disappear. So since the court was taking care of it, the court is a court. There's nothing we can do. That's fine.
Yeah,
As-
but we had the main reason.
and let me add,
Mhm,
I cannot recollect anyone
mhm,
making a complaint to the commission
mhm.
that, oh, this sheriff is not executing this whole thing properly. I can't remember it. If they did, it would be rumor. It would not be formally. Certainly, there was no complaint to me as counsel that, this is happening. Nothing I received. So if there is, but it's been 7 years. I would like to see it. But
The-
there was no complaint that I remember receiving during that period that the sheriff did not do his work properly.
Ms. Bensouda, with due respect, did you read my notes? Because that's going to be my next question.
Ah,
Then elaborate further on it. Because I will still ask the question.
Okay, the court made an order. It was to be executed by the sheriff.
Mhm.
But if a complaint had come to the commission that something was going wrong in the sales or whatever, the commission at minimum would have brought it to the attention, made an order to, if it will send investigators firstly, it will send the investigators to go and verify that indeed the complaint has merit. And if the complaint had merit, then there are things the commission could do. But bring it to the attention of the Attorney General for action to be taken. Bring it to the attention of IGP for police investigations to take place. It could do something. But at the end of the day, the commission, that was really the court's problem.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ms. Bensouda. I mean, now we understand that the commission was really satisfied with the court order, and eventually other people had responsibilities to play. Although we equally understand that after the end of the entire process, maybe 6, 7 years down the line, the reports that are coming out now are not pleasant news to the commissioners and even the lead counsel.
Perhaps the National Assembly should have been monitoring the situation.
We'll
We
get-
all have our oversight, and the
Yeah.
National Assembly failed also in its oversight to monitor what was going on.
Very well. We'll have that as part of our recommendations,
Okay.
and we'll probe into that issue. And be rest assured, if at all there is anything that the National Assembly can do differently, we would. We would definitely do that. You've seen indications of that in your submission, and then you'll be given the opportunity to elaborate on that. But my final question will be on the landed properties. And to do that, Secretariat, I would ask that you hand over volume 3 to the witness, volume 3 of the Janneh Commission report. And the question will be specific to Fajara South Atlantic, which you can find on page 29.
Volume 3.
Volume 3. And equally, if you have the receiver's report, that is Alpha Capital, of the landed properties, phase 1, phase 2, specifically phase 3, which should be a single sheet. Do you have that? The list of the landed properties in phases from the receiver Alpha Capital. Yes. Okay, maybe we can continue, Ms. Bensuda, whilst they look for that record. Ms. Bensuda, according to paragraph 14 of your statement, which I will read for you in full, it indicates that regarding properties, the Commission identified over 200. Those purchased by the former president from third parties using public funds were recommended for sale. In contrast, properties that were granted to him by government list were recommended to be cancelled, and for the lands to be referred to the state for public purposes or planning, where people claim that their properties were taken from them at undervalue through the sheriff's office. The Commission examined each complaint individually. If the purchase was funded from the state resources, the Commission recommendations were simple. If the complainant refunded the public funds used to acquire the property, they could reclaim it. And that's where I'm taking cue from.
Okay.
The Fajara South Atlantic.
Yes.
If you look at volume 3, page 29 of the Janneh Commission report,
Yes.
it indicates that the leasehold property lease number indicated dated on the 11th of June 1985. The previous owner's name is as well indicated. It says the property was sold to KFF by Ajib pursuant to a judgment of the High Court against the previous owner, whose name is indicated as the mortgagor, in favor of the bank as mortgage. The judgment also gave the bank conduct of the sales of the property. It says the property was sold by the bank and assigned to KFF by deed of assignment, SR number indicated, dated 8 August 2008. So now, if you look at the report of the receiver, Mr. Alpha Capital, this particular property is among the returned properties to their original owners. So I want us to help this committee understand, how does this property qualify to be among properties to be returned to their original owners?
Well, the Commission finding is clear at page 29. The conclusion is that the property is vested in KFF, which means the property belongs to KFF. However, if you come to the general recommendations of the Commission, it found as a fact that the former president had was responsible for a significant amount of money, some 300 and something thousand euro, if I remember, dollars and so on. So the general recommendation was that properties that were still vested in KFF, you know, the conclusion says vested in KFF. So the general recommendation was properties that were still vested in KFF, in the president, in any of his companies should be sold, and the proceeds set off against the amount the commission found that the president owed to the states. That was the final recommendation. So I don't know anything about Fajada South Atlantic after that. So I don't know how it came to be returned. That is that is not part of the commission, what the commission did. The commission said, concluded that the property was properly bought by KFF, Kanilai Family Farms. But then that was the conclusion at page 29. But then there's another conclusion which said the president owed this amount of money. All properties, including this one, should be sold and the money set off against what the president owed. So that is where it stopped at the commission. Anything that happened after that is not part of the commission's work.
Yes, very well then. And that's where we need your guidance, because the commission set the
My
parameters.
guidance.
Yes, absolutely. You set the parameters, the benchmarks.
The commission, yes.
Yes, you said you are the one who set the benchmark. So we want to understand whether indeed, after presenting the situation surrounding the acquisition of this property by the former president, and after the commission making a conclusion that the property was legitimately acquired by the former president, should this property qualify to be returned to the original owner as per the return rules that were set by the commission?
The commission didn't make such a recommendation, but I don't know how it came to be returned. So I cannot really go into something I don't know anything about. But what I can say is that the commission did not make any recommendation that this property be returned to the owner. It's quite clear from page 29. The commission's finding is the property belonged to Kanilai Family Farms, that's KFF. But I also know that as a general recommendation, there was a finding that the president owed this amount, an amount of money to the states, and that all his assets, that in respect of which there was no specific recommendation, like leases cancelled, for instance, some leases were cancelled. So all these properties were then forfeited to the state. Anything that he owed was forfeited to the state, and the state should have sold and set it up against the money that he owed. So, and any balance, of course, would have to be returned to him. But as I say, I cannot really help you, assist you in terms of how it then was returned to the owner.
Yes, Ms.
There might be
Miss-
something somewhere, but not certainly. Volume 3 covers all properties, and this property is stated belongs to KFF, so I'm
Yeah,
not
but-
aware of any other recommendation.
But would it be right to say that any authority who would have acted with regards to returning properties to original owners should have done so in accordance to the guidelines that were set up by the commission? Would it be right to
No,
say
the
that?
commission did not set up any guidelines to that effect.
Then help us understand paragraph 14 of your statement,
Okay.
where you said that the commission's recommendation were simple. If the complainant refunded the public funds used to acquire the property, they could reclaim it. If the matter was in the court, the commission left it to the courts to decide. Every such property is documented in volume 3 of the commission's report.
The claimants were claims made to the commission. This property, page 29, this property at page 29. It falls under a section called, let me see. That section is called landed properties acquired by purchase by ex-president.
Yes.
You will find at page properties with third-party claims at page 274. Yes. So all the properties in which third parties made a claim before the commission are what is set out in this chapter 7.
Good.
So it means that that property at page 29 did not make a claim to the commission.
Perfect.
So that's why it doesn't form part of properties with third party claims.
Perfect.
So these are the ones that I'm referring to at paragraph 14 of my statement, that for properties that had third-party claims, they were treated in a certain way.
Mhm.
But for properties that were an absolute purchase by the
Mhm.
president,
Mhm.
there was no claim. It meant
Mhm.
that the owner did not make any claim to the commission. So whatever claim that was made was after the commission submitted its report.
Yes, and Ms. Bensouda, thank you for that response, because the report we received from the receiver is the property is returned to the original owner.
I'm sure he has his reasons, but it has nothing to do with the commission.
And those reasons should have been based on the recommendations of the commission, right?
Sorry.
Whatever
The-
response you take, I would take that as a closure. Those reasons
No,
of the
I mean,
receiver, okay?
the commission made a recommendation. The
Mhm.
receiver was appointed after the commission
Mhm.
by the government. He must have his TOR. And I know perhaps people made claims afterwards. It's possible. But one has to look at it again in that context. It has nothing to, in other words, whatever capital, Alpha Capital did has nothing to do with the commission. So what he was doing depends on his terms of reference. I don't know. I've never seen his terms of reference. I've never seen the terms of his receivership and what he was supposed and what he was receiver of. If he was receiver to implement the recommendations of the commission, then that's what the receiver should do. But I don't know. So
Yeah,
to be honest, I cannot make a.
no, maybe I'll add context to this. In the report, you made reference to page 274, where you highlighted the properties that had third-party claims.
Yes.
And in those claims also were supposed to be determined and a closure will be made.
Yes.
And then in the receiver's report, you realize that some of those properties with third-party claims are listed on the properties that are returned to their original owners, where this particular property also is listed. And this is where the question is. We are not saying the original owner do not have the right to go and buy it, but why is preference given to the original owner when the property in question was legitimately acquired by the former president? And there were no claims on the property made to the Ghana Commission. We will respect it if you do not want to.
But I don't want to speculate, but let me
Yes.
just clarify that all these properties were supposed to be sold for the Gambia government to recover money from the president.
Perfect.
Now, that process of sale is what I understand was given to the receiver, Alpha Capital. So that's all I understand.
And in the process of sales, all of the properties were open to competitive bidding, open bidding. But the properties that were supposed to be returned to their original owners, where claims were made, the original owners were given preferences and only asked to return the value that was being what? Paid by the former president. So the question the committee wants answers to is, should that preference be given to this original owner?
Well, you're asking the wrong person.
Thank you very
You
much.
lawyers are very careful. I
Thank
don't
you.
have all the facts, so I will not venture any opinion on this.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you.
Bensouda. Yes. Chair?
I
Back to you.
appreciate the questions.
Thank you. So, Ms. Bensouda, I have only one question with regards to the issue of the. Just a bit more clarification on the issue of the cattles. Now, if you look at the report, what was reported, the report that we have seen, and of course, submission from um, the registrar, the former registrar general, under whose custody the cattles were, you know, were given. As part of the commission, when you reported, like you said, cattle were missing. Now, when that report came, did the commission do any investigation to understand how those cattle were missing? Because we were told that cattle were missing. I mean, about 400 cattle were slaughtered. Did the commission do any inquiry on that to understand exactly how it happened?
No, no, the commission relied on the Registrar General who had custody and was in charge. No separate investigations were conducted as to how the cattle became missing. And the investigators that were sent really certainly did not have that capacity, really, to be honest. But the correct answer is no. No investigations were done. We accepted the statement that cattle were missing and worked on that.
All right, that's fine. Thank you. Jambi, you have a question? We are running out of time. I think today is Juma. I was thinking maybe you either start, but then at some point we'll have to stop at 1:30 for Friday press,
Very well.
or we break and come back. I don't know. You want to start and then we can break at 1:30. It depends on.
Perhaps I know members of the committee had questions. I was thinking maybe we could have been done with the witness before we go for Juma, but seeing the time now, perhaps we continue to 1:30, so that when we do come back, it will not take a lot of time.
Then we can start with Honorable Jambi. At least by 1:30, I'll stop, and then we can go for break. Thank you.
Yeah, just notify me 5 minutes
Sure.
to that time. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Bensouda, for being with us for the past days. My first question would draw us to your statement on clause 12.
The witness statement, huh?
Yeah, the witness statement,
You have it.
paragraph 12 or clause 12,
Yes.
think which is about the National Assembly itself. And as a young parliamentarian, I would definitely appreciate to understand what you meant by that statement, more especially being disappointed about the National Assembly in terms of understanding the in-depth report of the white paper.
Thank you for asking that question. Um, Perhaps you are preempting what I was going to say at closure, I think. Now, the the Constitution created three arms of state, and this is the executive, the judicature being the courts, and the National Assembly. And the commission of inquiry that was issued over Janneh and his assets and dealings with government institutions was perhaps the most important commission that the Gambia has ever had to, any president had ever had to issue. Because it was a commission that dealt with a situation that spanned from 1994 to 2017. So it should have been the most consequential in terms of its outcome and how that outcome fed into the transition. And we all Gambians agreed that there needed to be a correction, a course correction. So I would have expected that the National Assembly, and I think not I, but the National Assembly ought to have in its role as the most important supervisory organ of states, ought to have set up right from the get-go, as soon as the commission finished and submitted its recommendation, and the recommendation was available, the reports were available, they ought to have set up some sort of process that would supervise, that would read the reports, the recommendations, the findings and recommendations, and look at the white paper that the president issued, and determine and supervise within their own jurisdiction, supervise the process that then emanated from from the outcome of the commission's work. So the commission finished, submitted its report. The president issues a white paper. There was no accountability as far as the white paper was concerned. There was no one to determine why the president accepted some recommendations, did not accept some. The steps that the president decided that it mapped out in the white paper that it was going to take to implement the report, there was no oversight there. After that, when the implementation of the white paper also started, there was no oversight. There was no oversight. The things that are being discussed now, what happened to properties, what was done 7 years ago, ought to have been done. And the only institution that could have properly done so is the National Assembly. So these reports, to be honest, it would appear that they were not read. The Commission of Inquiry made hundreds of recommendations. And to me, the recommendations were more important than the adverse findings against individuals that were dealt with somewhat. The recommendations were what was supposed to help the transition, help the country correct its course, avoid the mistakes that were made. So if there is a report that assets, cars, cattle, and vehicles were dealt with improperly, by all means, it should be investigated. But that should not be the core of what, to my mind, this August body should be doing. These reports are 9 volumes. Embedded in these reports are important recommendations. I think it was the National Assembly's duty to have taken the necessary steps, and perhaps we would not have reached this stage 6 years later, because it's easy to correct. In law, we have what is called limitation. There's a time limit to pursue someone in terms of civil matters. Criminal, perhaps that is open, but there's a time limit. And with time, people forget. With time, things get lost. Investigating whether vehicles were properly sold 6, 7 years ago, really, it's a difficult task. And but for me, that's a distraction. The main issue is the recommendations. What about the land? This is volume 3. There are so many recommendations that, especially in relation to leases, the leases should be cancelled. So many leases cancelled, and the land revert back to the state for planning purposes. That the state should plan this land, because we have resource constraints, and land is a problem. But you find that most of the empty land that I recognize have been dealt with by the commission are being built on. So what is it? How? Why? How come the commission's recommendations were not followed in relation to some of them? So what is happening? So I think perhaps we are trying to, I think I appreciate this committee and what the National Assembly is doing. And in this paragraph, what I'm saying is that it is too little too late. And the National Assembly should ensure that it puts in place the right framework for ensuring that commissions of inquiry that are so important should be the outcome of commissions of inquiry, and how the government deals with the outcomes of commissions of inquiry should be under the supervision of the National Assembly. That's what I mean by this paragraph.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to follow up, do you want to say in the process of the implementation of the white paper, the government of the day has failed in totality, and also the National Assembly has also failed in their responsibility?
I'll start with the last. I say the National Assembly failed in its responsibility to supervise the executive. Now, I don't like to use the term fail, because a minister of state went on the air and was asked, and he said the commission had failed the nation. I was disappointed to hear that statement, because it showed that there was no understanding in the government, no understanding of what the commission is about. And perhaps, even though we are short on time, what I would like to do, I think, is refer to a certain passage in the judgment of the Supreme Court, where the court explained what a commission of inquiry is and is not. And in that passage, the court clearly said, I have it here. It's just 1 minute, and I'll read it. The court said, the commission is not a lawmaking body. It has no legislative powers and does not fall within the legislature. It is an investigative fact-finding body which makes findings and recommendations that are subject to the approval of the government. While the commission has a duty to act fairly, impartially, and independently, it is nonetheless not an adjudicatory body. It is not a court of law, superior or otherwise. The final outcome of its work is determined by the president. It is not a creature of statute with a separate, distinct legal personality of its own, but solely a creation of the executive. It has a finite lifespan, and once this assignment is completed, it is functus officio and ceases to exist. All these features combined, taken together, lead the court to the conclusion that the commission is part and parcel of the executive government of the Gambia. That is what the court said. So the government cannot disown the commission. The commission worked for the government and submitted its report to the government. The government becomes wholly, entirely responsible for the commission's recommendations and for implementing it. It becomes solely responsible for anything that the commission did as per its report and handed over to the government. So the government issued a white paper accepting some recommendations, rejecting some recommendations. Mostly it accepted the recommendations. But in terms of following up and implementing those recommendations, there has been a major failure. Instead of the report as was expected by some of us when we accepted the assignment, because this was a period when everybody was excited. Some things have gone wrong and Gambia needed to course correct. And I, for one, was proud to be part of the process, but heartily disappointed in the fact that the recommendations of the commission, in relation to people findings, that's a distraction. Individuals being taken to court, their things, that is not what is important. What is important is for us to correct our system, to correct our institutions, to make sure we course correct. And there has been a major failure on the part of government to do that. That's where the failure is.
Um, I want to just a bit correct that statement to say I think as part of the process to initiate the National Assembly Select Committee is actually to help correct those errors. And reflecting on the past as well, you may be aware that the National Assembly also has various select committees, including the Human Rights Committee. And I want to believe in the process of the oversight, the issue of the Janneh Commission was never taken light by the National Assembly. And I can recall as well, when the Janneh Commission, in fact, for the third or fourth time, wanted to seek for an extension, and the then minister needed to come before the National Assembly to seek for funds, he clearly wrote back to the commission informing them that he don't think he could go back to the National Assembly, that is to say to the plenary, to seek for funds in order to give an extension to the Janneh Commission for the fact that the National Assembly, as much as they were in support of the process of the Janneh Commission, were also concerned as to where taxpayers' money was going. So at some extent, I want to believe, yes, the National Assembly were actually doing their job, considering the procedures or processes that involves or evolves around the work of the National Assembly. However, still looking at failure, don't you think it even started from the word go? And this would lead me to another question. That is to say, why was it that the commission or your supervisory office never followed up with the Ministry of Justice seeking for the report of the Sheriff Division on the cattle than just letting it go like that?
Thank you. And I appreciate the fact that a committee was set up, even though 7 years later, to investigate the assets. But the assets are not just cattle and vehicles. The more important assets were the land. And I'm not sure, but I have not been following. What I expected was that there would be focus on the land. What happened? All these spaces, what happened to them? What happened to all the land that were confiscated from Janneh? That's what I think is the more important issue. Now, also, I appreciate the fact that even though late, this committee is being set up as a way of, I think, the National Assembly at least being alive to the fact that they do have a role when it comes to commissions of inquiry, that when the commission finishes its work, before the commission finishes the work, certainly it doesn't have much to do. But when the commission finishes it, taxpayer money is used, the commission submits its recommendation at the end of its work, then their supervisory role ought to kick in to see what the executive does with the report. One, first, to find out what it is that the outcome of the commission's work. What is it that the commission found, and what are these recommendations? Are there recommendations that the National Assembly itself should look at? Because if you look at the commission's recommendations, some of them have legislative implications. So the National Assembly should check and see these recommendations, which of them can we take on? Which committee can actually take over, look at the recommendation and actually implement it? What role can we play? That's what I'm talking about. In terms of during the process and supporting the commission and providing money, that's routine. That is just housekeeping. But its role in terms of the recommendation of the commission, that's major. Now going back to the cattle, as I have explained, the commission has no authority over the courts at all whatsoever. Yes, perhaps we could have written to the sheriff, but we did write to the sheriff, in fact, asking for his report. And the report, up to the time I think we closed, if I recollect, was not forthcoming. But there wasn't anything we could do. The commission was inundated, it was busy, it was hurrying to finish. So really, it really didn't have much to do. There wasn't anything, in fact, it could do. We would have loved to have the report and included it. But I'm sure the commissioners would have. But in hindsight, as you're fond of saying, it was very good we did not have, because we wouldn't have had time to investigate whether the report was correct or not, whether the work was properly done or not. So in hindsight, it's in fact, it was good that we never had the report, because we didn't have the ability to go and check whether the report was accurate or not.
For me, I would believe that that should be the starting point. For the fact that the commission took over from the sheriff division in terms of the cattle.
No. We didn't take over from the sheriff division. The sheriff division took over, and that was the end of it. The
And
commission
they
went
do
on.
and they did the sales.
Yeah, the sheriff division did the sales.
But you reported on the sales of the cattle.
No,
Who reported on the sales of the cattle?
I don't know who reported here on the sale of the cattle. It must be the sheriff.
It must be the sheriff.
When the report ordered in December 2017
Yes.
that the sheriff would take care of the sale, would Gilmer will help the sheriff value the cattle, and the money will be paid in the courts. That was it. That commission finished with the issue of cattle. Commission never considered the issue of cattle again.
But I want to believe it forms part of the mandate of the commission to investigate on the cattle as well as you were investigating on other matters.
No, the mandate of the commission was up to um, 21st. Is it 21st January 2016, 2017?
Yes.
Anything that happened up to that date is our mandate. The sale of the cattle was different. It was just the commission saying, look, make sure these cattle are not stolen. Let's do something to make sure cattle are not stolen. The court says they would do it. So it was the responsibility of the court to take care of the situation. It was no longer the responsibility of the commission.
Yeah, but having the commission as well, engaging the office of the sheriff, telling them that they should ensure the sales take its due process.
Oh, we could not do that. We did not have power to interfere with the court's jurisdiction. Even if we attempted it, the court will ignore us and reprimand us.
But what were you doing here in ensuring that the sales of the cattle actually takes its due process?
It was no longer our responsibility. It was no longer our responsibility
Okay, now I want to take you on paragraph 13
of my statement.
of your statement.
Okay.
It is said that for the second paragraph, those against whom findings were made, including international companies involving millions of dollars, had the right to go to court. What became of those cases remains unclear, as no one followed up. I recall instances where findings were made against companies abroad, such as the Switzerland-based firm, and the government had intended to pursue because this fraud and dishonesty were alleged. 6 years later, people are still chasing cattle and vehicles. I seems to like that part. Ignoring far more important matters in the report that deserve urgent attention
Yes.
from the National Assembly.
Yes.
Could you kindly guide this National Assembly, aside from, let's say, the cattle, the vehicles, and the lands, which is the properties,
Listen.
what other matter do you think was of relevance that either the National Assembly do not take seriously or they should really pick up and ensure there was sanity?
Okay. Now, this is a critique, definitely. What my submission to the National Assembly is that all 9 volumes contain recommendations. And there are some international companies that against whom findings were made. And one of them, this Swiss-based company, is called MGI. And they were responsible for the gateway. It was easy for, after the report was submitted, I understand, of course, people against whom adverse findings were made, many of them challenged the report. And mostly, I believe it was those based in Gambians who challenged the report because they were more vulnerable. And those international companies against whom findings were made, who were here, also perhaps. But there was this particular company, MGI, that was based in Switzerland, against whom recommendations were made. But what happened? So what was the outcome of those recommendations? They were supposed to pay millions to Gambia government. You can look at the recommendations in 9 volumes. Each volume has recommendations at the end. So, I mean, these were the these were the more important recommendations.
That will
This
take us to volume 5
this
later.
cattle, cattle vehicles, yes, important because we cannot allow people to misappropriate anything or commit fraud and get away with it. That's for sure. But really, that is not what the commission was about. The commission was about things that happened pre the cutoff date, which is 21st January 2017. Who was involved? What damage was done to the economy? How can we course correct? That was the more important thing. I mean, so I think when we talk about assets, um, there were more substantial assets. And this is, I think, what we should be interested in. When you talk about findings, there were international companies against whom findings were made. Where is the report about what happened? What happened to those companies? I've never heard again what happened in the case of MGI Switzerland. I've never heard of anyway. This is what I'm alluding to. That there are more important issues.
So just to enlighten us further, aside from MGI or MJI, if I may be right here, which other company or asset outside the Gambia, let's say an offshore asset, for example, or an offshore account, were ignored after the work of the commission that you think requires genuine attention?
I highlighted the case, the company in Switzerland, and I identified as MGI because that's what certainly came to my came to my head, if I may say so, when I was writing this report. But off the cuff, I cannot really name any company. The recommendations are there. I'm inviting you all to go through the recommendations of the commission. The recommendations are there.
No, to be honest with you, Ma, we have been reading these recommendations.
Good.
But again, not every other Gambian has the opportunity to read through the recommendations. However, having you before us, I believe you could also guide this committee and the Gambian at large to understand some of the recommendations that were embedded in the reports to better understand and also, if need be, find better solutions to address these problems.
I'd have to read the recommendations again, and I wasn't expecting that question to do justice to that question, but my testimony really was to draw attention to what was important. Um, Given time, certainly I could do that, but I don't want to be cherry picking through the report on recommendation. I don't think that would be fair. The recommendations are before you. I think you should look at them and identify what is important. I'm not sure you have a mandate to go beyond what you're doing. Certainly, in terms of property, you do. In terms of companies and so on, I am not sure. But as I said, these reports are easy to read, and the commission had done a job. These three fine gentlemen and women have done a great job of really making recommendations that could have been a game changer had they been implemented. But sitting right now, it's difficult for me to just take you through 9 volumes and say, look at this recommendation, look at this recommendation. So, um,
That is fair enough.
with respect,
And,
thank you.
and as the work of a parliamentarian is continuity, I still want to believe that the National Assembly, as part of their oversight, should still have the mandate to continue holding the executive to account. So basically, I want to believe we still have the mandate to continue on our oversight and also holding the executive to account. We can still progress, Ms. Bensouda. Okay, time, huh?
Yeah. I think at this point it's very convenient for us to go out for break for Juma prayers and come back again. At we can come back at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock will be fine. Please. After Juma prayers. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.